Now,
all of those yogas that I just mentioned, they're all in Parashara.
So these are all things that for everybody watching, this is all stuff that is the basic foundational chopping block of Asheville Vedic Astrology, which my audience knows that is the main schooling that I took to get where I am in my present state on YouTube. So now, Laura, I invite you can take the reins here and you can rock and roll and let us know everything that you think about Jaimini. Now, we've already taken a lot of time, Laura. I don't know where you're at for time, but I'm okay. I can keep rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, sweet. So you take as much time as you like, and I'm very excited to show what you've got in mind to convey to the audience today.
Okay, great. So what I love about Jaimini is, he predicts talents and career, which is just below your mind accurate. It's so accurate. What kind of your spouse, the type of person they are, even the spouse's illnesses, your illnesses, wealth, fame. Are you going to have it or are you not going to have it? Okay. Now, usually there's, when you see a lot of named Parashara yogas, like we were just discussing, you want to see that confirmed in Jaimini too.
Right.
Okay. And I know we were talking about this last time, and I was looking for a certain yoga that would give fame, usually gives wealth and fame.
Gotcha.
Called Shrimantaha.
Shrimantaha.
And when now it's not fame like, super like a movie star.
Celebrity.
Fame,
Yeah,
celebrity fame, but fame that is you're well known in your career, profession, and you do very well for yourself and you do better than the average of your culture.
In regards to that thing.
Right. So that's what a Shrimantaha is. Now, he does not have this, but he does have something else. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
Certainly.
First, I want to talk about career.
Perfect.
Okay. Career is determined through the Atmakaraka and something they call the padas and the house cusp. Okay. And you always have to qualify it in the D60. But generally speaking, his Atmakaraka is Mercury, and Mercury rules art. Believe it or not, Mercury rules artists, all types of artists.
Certainly, and that does make sense.
Visual artists. Mercury actually rules a lot of things.
Right, and the Atmakaraka, everybody ought to know that the Atmakaraka is Jaimini's calling card in a lot of ways. It's sort of like the Lagna Lord in the Jaimini sense.
Right. Absolutely. The Atmakaraka represents the self. It's a self factor. It's a personal planet, basically.
Right.
So it can by itself give career. And that's what it did for him. It gave his career, Mercury by himself.
Right.
What you want to look for is Mercury in the Rashi chart or the Atmakaraka in the Rashi chart. And also in the Navamsha. The Navamsha is more important.
Right.
So Mercury's by himself in the Navamsha. Now Mercury is with the sun in the Rashi chart, and the sun actually rules entrepreneurship or being your own boss, basically.
That's
being your own boss.
A constant Jaimini Karaka attribute of the sun.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And believe it or not, the sun rules singers.
Interesting.
People who sing. The moon rules music and musicians, but the sun is the singer.
So the moon creates the consciousness of what would be a good song. The sun is the performer. Right.
Because, I guess in the scheme of things, if you want to kind of think about it, when you go to see people perform, you always remember the singer. It's the singer who stands out the most.
Right.
Pretty much.
Not just the production.
Right. Yeah. But art in general, all of the all of the training, because Mercury rules training and apprenticeship and repetition and skills. All of the training and skill set that goes into being a good artist or performing artist is ruled by Mercury.
I often think of it that Mercury is like the prince. When we think of the Graha ages, Mercury tends to open up, I believe, from 7 to about 12, just before puberty.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is a
Mercury
time
is
where
initiatory instructions.
initiatory instructions.
Yeah, like that time you're learning to read and your math tables and all that stuff. That's
Right.
Mercury.
Right.
And Mercury is artisans, you know, it's you need to be skillful and you need to practice, and that's all ruled by Mercury. Now the finished product, the finished painting, the finished performance, the musical composition, song, whatever, that's ruled by Venus. You know, that's something you can purchase or, you know, have in your house or listen to on the stereo, whatever, or your phone.
A fungible production item.
Right. That is actually ruled by Venus, but the person doing these things, that's Mercury. Okay.
Cool.
So Mercury is giving him this profession. Mercury is conjoined the fifth cusp. Now, when we look at the Atmakarika, it's really important to look at the house cusp it's joined, not the house from the ascendant or not the sign from the ascendant.
Very good.
This is really important about the house cusp because the cusp is the bhava, and bhava means something coming into being or the created thing in actual phenomena.
Right.
So it's the actual thing that comes up here on earth. And the fifth house is creations and creativity. You can also, you know, if you want to look at it from equal house, equal sign, equal house, the fourth house is artwork.
Right.
You know, the paintings you have hanging in your house or whatever. That is the fourth house. But the fifth house is creative intelligence. It's any type of creative activity that we do, that we are inspired to do, that's flowing through us. So that is something that he was probably the most prolific artist ever.
Right. Yeah.
In the history of the world, I think he was. The amount of work that he turned out.
Just constantly. Yeah. And so the Atmakarika, just by being with the fifth cusp, there's a whole world of implication just from that.
Yes, exactly. And so that can be seen in Jaimini. The Atmakarika has a lot to say about who the person is and what their inherent talents is. And whatever it's joined in the Navamsha or in the Rashi is also going to color that too, and also give him another talent.
Right.
You know, so, and so the sun rules over entrepreneurs, singers, and it's also politicians or anybody who works for the government, because the sun, of course, is authority. It's the king.
Okay.
And he actually had some political leanings. I mean, he was a member of the Communist Party, but he did have some political stuff going on, but he didn't actually go down that career route. But
it wasn't his main shtick, but there was significations of it wrapped up in his career as an artist. And
definitely.
Mercury Atmakarika. Would we kind of implicate at some level that we could see him being an authority on the skill of Mercury and on the skill of art and the fifth house cusp?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Right. Because he really was. When you think about
he definitely was. So, and then you would look at this in the Rashi chart and the Navamsha.
Okay.
Now, what you usually look for if a person's going to rise above the average or the norm, and usually it means glorious wealth. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be, Elon Musk or somebody. It just
Yeah,
means you're
yeah.
going to be above the norm, above the average.
Okay. All right.
And the more you see it, the more above average you go. So that is when you have the Atmakarika with Jupiter, the moon, or Venus. Okay, Jupiter, moon, or the Venus, or an exalted planet.
Right. Right.
And you look for that in the Rashi chart or the Navamsha.
Okay.
But it's more powerful in the Navamsha.
Right. Right. Certainly.
Okay. And he doesn't have that.
I see. Yeah.
He doesn't have that. But there's another thing that he has that is more obscure, which is a Raj Yoga, which is going to make him a king. And that's when you have Venus and the moon in the third from each other. One of them in the third from each other, or if they're conjoined, and they don't have to be an Atmakarika. So
right. So just by them being in the first and third house, signs or houses from each other, they are implying this.
Yes. And you can look at this in the Rashi chart, and you can also look at it in the Navamsha.
Very good.
And it's what they call Yavanaha.
Yavanaha.
And let me make sure that's what that is.
Yep. No problem. I believe I've seen that
correctly.
For sure.
But,
Laura, take your time.
What it basically means is you're riding in a palanquin. And that, like, you're riding in like this thing with, a canopy over your head, and people are carrying you. And what that means is you can be seen by everybody. So that means that you're famous.
Famous in the way that we originally were talking about it, which is like people know you, like celebrity level.
Right. Your celebrity level.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is one of the yogas that even boosts you even further than
that makes
just
sense,
the
Laura.
Srimantaha.
Like we could almost say that really the Srimantaha shows significations that you are going to be great in your personal field, whether anybody ever sees that or not. This Yavana yoga, I believe is how you'd say it, is showing that you're just going to be famous for fame's sake.
Yes. It can also mean that you're in front of the public for a particular purpose.
Right.
Like you're a spokesperson for something.
Or
you're a public relations person. But it does put you in front of the public.
Interesting.
And it's
no rush. Take your time.
I found it.
Perfect.
Okay, here it is. Venus and the moon together, mutually aspecting or standing in the third place. Yanavanta.
I see.
Yanavanta, yeah. So they can also be Rashi aspecting each other.
Okay.
And that you're going to look at that in the Navamsha or here. So he's got it in the Rashi chart. The moon is in the third from Venus.
And if I'm not mistaken, he also has a Rashi aspect between the two in the Navamsha chart. Is that where you were going with that?
Oh, no, he doesn't.
And this is Venus and Mercury that you're talking about? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Venus. Seeing what you mean. I misread no
worries.
The Rashi aspect. Okay, Laura, I see where you're at, though. I can see that Venus and the moon are at this third place from each other. Really, the moon's in the third place from Venus.
Yeah, and the reasoning behind that is, the moon is the public. And so Venus is kind of the diplomat. Venus rules over things like luxuries and manners and etiquette. So when they are associated in this way, the person is usually in front of the public for entertainment purposes too, because Venus is entertainment.
Okay, right. And this probably gives an ability, everybody loves entertainment. It's a very common thing to be an infotainer. If you've got information that's useful, you're going to get it out there better if it's also entertaining.
Right. Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
And yeah, the third is also the entertainment industry and
Mhm.
performing arts and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that can be seen quite nicely too. And then if you want to just kind of hook up the house cusps to it, the fourth house is again artwork. So he's famous for artwork because he's got this yoga with Venus starting and then the moon in the third.
Right.
So overall, yeah, this is a really good chart to demonstrate that particular yoga.
Certainly. It's very, very true in Pablo Picasso's case because of how known he was as the person who was doing his thing.
Definitely.
Very
Now,
clear.
so that's what gave him such strong fame because he's lacking that Srimantaha yoga that would
Ah.
usually pushes a person beyond the norm. But
Mm.
this yoga, the Yavananta, Yanavanta,
Yana
as they
Vanta.
say.
It's cool because, you know, it just goes to show you. I think Srimantaha is one of those uh, words that people look for big, huge fame. People almost, you know, we could easily be inclined to think that only the people with Srimantaha are going to have the biggest things happening. But
Yeah,
someone
and
like
that's
Pablo
not
Picasso,
true.
right?
Yeah.
Pablo Picasso has everything that we've seen in Parashara, and this was proliferated by this Yana. I wonder if you can get
Yanavanta.
Yanavanta. Thank you very much.
Yanavanta, yeah.
And that was
Yanavanta.
enough. That was enough for him to give at least the fame. And that fame was a kindling, a fire that would bring out the potentials that we've already talked about.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
There's also something, okay, I'm going to bring up the D10.
All right.
Okay. This is the chart for power and influence or success, but it's usually it's the chart of how much you're able to influence the world, or, you know, it's like the 10th house is worldly responsibilities. And the 10th house is fame, or how much power and influence you have. So
right.
This is a derivative of that.
As a Varga.
Right. And there is a particular yoga you look in this to see if you have a life of accomplished deeds, quote unquote.
Okay.
And so this is, well, there's two things. If you have a Saturn as your Atmakaraka, they say you'll have a life of accomplished deeds. Okay, that's all. And there's a lot of people who have that, right?
Yes, certainly.
So,
certainly.
you know, 1 out of 7.
But, yeah.
But that just means probably because Saturn is the ability to get through adversities and be alone, because Saturn's a loner. So you are able to not be distracted by social situations and things of that nature. And I think that's why he says that. And you're able to get more work done, basically.
Yeah, you're doing what's important to your progression, no matter what the state of your life is in at any moment.
Right.
I know a lot of Saturn Atmakaraka people.
Yeah, I'm one too. So
oh, lovely. My girlfriend is Saturn Atmakaraka, and I love.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense to me.
Okay, so then you're going to look at you take your Atmakaraka and you look at it in this D10, see what sign it occupies. In his case, it's Scorpio. And you look at the 10th from it. Because Mercury's in Scorpio, which is a feminine sign, we count backwards.
Okay.
So we count anti-zodiacally. So that would be Aquarius would be the 10th. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep.
And what you're looking for is if Mercury is there. Well, his Atmakaraka is Mercury. So that doesn't apply. But it is, I just wanted to mention it in case people are watching. If they find their Atmakaraka in this D10 and look at the 10th from it, if you've got Mercury there or Mercury aspecting, you have a life of accomplished deeds. That means you go a lot farther than most people in your power and influence and in your career.
Yeah, we were talking about Mercury has a constancy. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Mercury is a manifesting planet. And,
so
and that's one of the reasons I think he says that. But there is something I want to point out too. Okay, so in Jaimini, you have the scheme of what they call Charakarakas up here. And these are individual to the person based on the degrees of the planet and the signs. And every planet means something, you know, it represents a person mainly. Okay.
I often consider them to almost resonate in some ways with the first 7 houses of the zodiac.
Right.
There would be a certain resonance there for anyone who's just picking up on what we're saying here. So the Atmakaraka resonates with the first house. Atmayakaraka resonates with the second. Bhatrukaraka relates with the third, etc. Pitrikaraka is the fifth. And, you know, there's more significations than just strictly that. But I think that's a good primer for people.
Yes. In this software, you've got it up here too, that it'll name the people that it represents. But in addition to that, Jaimini goes into what natural karakas mean. And he mentions that before he even mentions the Charakarakas. So they are extremely important as well. You have to qualify and mitigate some of the so like Jupiter is the husband or boyfriend for women, but then the Darakaraka is also the spouse.
Right.
Okay. So both of those mean a certain thing. Venus for, you know, marriage and then the Darakaraka for a man, or, you know, however you want to do those things. Mars is siblings. But he actually has Mars as siblings here too, but natural, that just happened to fall that way. But so you have the natural karakas, and the natural Atmakaraka is the sun. And the sun is always really important in a person's life, no matter what, you know, even if it isn't your Charakaraka for the Atmakaraka, it's still very important. And especially later in life, the person always gets really involved with where the sun is, usually later in life, what house it occupies, any planets it's with. The person will take an interest in that later in life because they've built up a foundation where they can express their true self. Because we're operating mainly in the first part of life at our moon, because the moon is adapting to everything. It's adapting to all the situations. You know, if we don't have a lot of money and we have to pay rent and we have to get a job just to pay the bills, that's the moon.
Right. And
if we're doing exactly what we want to do, that's the sun. Okay.
And it's not often that people get to do that early.
That's our inspiration, you know, and usually when you're older, you move more into your sun. Right. So you start becoming more interested in where the sun is.
And what you're doing with your life.
Right, right. And in this D10 chart, there's 2 karakas. There's the sun and Saturn. And now Jaimini says the sun is the natural karaka of the self. And sun in Parashara is power and influence. Certainly. So he's got his sun here in Cancer, which is foreign countries. Right. And which he became very successful in a foreign country and lived most of his life in a foreign country. And then Saturn is exalted in this chart. And Saturn is, you know, I'm kind of deviating from Jaimini, but I just really wanted, this is more of a Parashara. To clarify. Yes, please. But this is really important because if you look at this chart, Saturn is exalted. Saturn is also the 7th cusp lord. in this chart, and the moon is in the 7th house, another public. So
are you
it's
pointing
just,
more to the 7th house cusp there, or
yeah, it would always be the 7th house.
The
anyway.
cusp. Gotcha. Oh, okay. No, okay, I got you. Okay, very good.
Yeah. So he's got the moon in the 7th public, and the 7th house is a secondary 10th house because it's the 10th from the 10th.
Ah, yes.
So usually, what the public really likes about us usually is what we become very strong and influential in the 10th house. So
the 10th house.
So he's got an exalted Saturn here. Saturn is also a karaka of this chart because it numerologically, it synchronizes because this is the 7th Varga in the Shodasha Varga scheme, and Saturn is the 7th planet. But Saturn is also all of that tedious work and boring things we have to go through to get to a high place.
Place.
Right.
Right.
Totally, so that's why he says, Saturn accomplished deeds.
Right. So it's interesting that he has Saturn exalted, just the 7th karaka, the 7th lord of the chart, and Saturn being the numerology of 7 in general, being exalted in the D10 shows that he's doing what he needs to do in the world around him and connecting with the right networking in order to bring his D10 chart to the highest that it can be.
Yes.
And the public is involved with this because of that moon in Aquarius. Right.
The moon is the public and the 7th house is the public. So the 10th cusp in this chart and the 7th cusp become very important. And it's exalted, or there's an exalted planet next to the 10th cusp, and then the moon next to the 7th. So
I appreciate how much you have this grasp on interlinking confluent numerology arcs. Because all of these are falling. I see how they're falling all into place, and I see why you're putting a priority to them in this reading.
Yeah.
It's very cool because it's one of those things that are hard to define really what's most important to see in astrology. I can see that you're linking all of these confluent themes to these singular points where they all add up to the same thing.
Yeah. You can really start seeing the patterns, especially when you start knowing the numbers, which is just fascinating, and when you start getting into cards of truth, once you know the numbers, you really start to understand the Vargas so much better. And then the cards of truth incorporate the numbers so strongly. But
wonderful.
So yeah, that's really all I wanted to. I think I'm pretty much
tapped for our Jaimini for now.
Karaka. Oh, and I want to mention something else. Okay, so
please.
This is another Jaimini technique. Okay. So spouse, everybody wants to know about this. Okay, so I'm just going to throw this in.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so significant others. Jaimini says to look, well, there's a couple of things. You look at the Dara Karaka. Okay, that's the natural planet of the spouse.
Right.
And you're usually going to attract people into your life who embody the qualities of the Dara Karaka, generally.
Right. Okay. So I guess we really have to combine the natural Karaka with the Chara Karaka in order to see what the Chara Karaka means to the chart.
Yes, definitely.
Because it's significant that the sun would be the Dara Karaka of this chart.
Yeah, the sun is the planet in the lowest degrees in his chart. So the sun represents his spouse. The women that he's with, his wife. He was married twice, I think, and had a bunch of girlfriends. He was always in a relationship.
Right.
And so that also, so you look at the Dara Karaka and then you go to the D7. You look at the Atma Karaka. Okay, you find the Atma Karaka in the D7 and you look at the 7th from it. And that's going to show you a lot about the person that they marry and just their relationships in general and who they attract into their lives, who's going to embrace them, right?
Very interesting.
In addition to that, you can also look at the 7th house in this chart.
Okay.
You get then, and you look at all those things, you're going to get a really detailed picture.
Right. And I suppose it'll always have like entanglements, because we can see that we've got Rahu in that 7th house, which shows some difficulty, but having Jupiter in the 7th from the Atmakaraka really must be a huge, he must have gained a lot of positive romantic and marriage capacities through that.
Definitely. Jupiter, actually, Jaimini says Jupiter makes someone beautiful. So it means the women that he was with were beautiful. Jupiter and the moon, physically and, psychologically.
Right.
He doesn't mention Venus, but he does. Venus represents devotion. So it makes the person very devoted when it's in the 7th from the Atmakaraka.
Okay. Okay. That's sweet. I get that. That's cool.
Yeah, because Venus does rule devotion. But then in his 7th house from the ascendant, it's got Rahu. And of course, Rahu is very volatile, taboo. But Rahu's also foreigners.
Right.
And every woman that he was with was foreign to him. They weren't Spanish. His first wife was Russian, I think.
Right.
Yeah. And then all the other women were French.
Right.
So there you go. There it is.
Very interesting. And I guess that part of the reason why they probably seemed so different to him is because he himself, when it comes to romance, had Ketu in the 1st house of the D7. So he probably held on in a lot of ways to some things and probably anticipated that his lovers would kind of shake him out of how stuck he was in a certain idea of who he was supposed to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
By having that K2 in the ascendant.
Very, very true. Absolutely.
Very, very cool, Laura. Gosh, I'm glad I'm talking with you about this, because this is just whetting my appetite to get more into Jaimini for my own personal chart studying.
Yeah, Jaimini is great. It's very cut and dry. It's simple, but it's cut and dry. And you can say, oh, you have great looking, you like people who are really good looking. Right. Or Jupiter is going to give an abundance of anything.
Certainly.
And that's what he had. So
it's very useful to see that from the 7th. And I wonder if Jaimini gives other things for what you can see in the D7, like I know Jaimini is cryptic, so he probably doesn't do the cookbook type stuff. Like, what if Jupiter is in the 12th house in your D7? What if Jupiter is in your 2nd house in the D7? He probably just gives more of the specific indications for the 7th house of the D7, and then that would be right.
The 7th from the Atmakaraka. That's what he mainly talks about. Oh, and there's other way you can see whether the person never gets married. You can see whether the person gets divorced. You can see whether the person if there is a huge scandal around the divorce. Right. And those have to do more with what they call the upapada. But
very good, Laura.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something that I'm going to be talking more about my Jaimini on my channel as we come along for everybody interested. But for now, Laura, that was very clarifying in terms of what you've been showing us here.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to, that's a lot.
Very good. Yeah, that was great. Great for our Jaimini expression. Now, I think that we've still got some time left. I invite you now, Laura, to talk about, if you'd like, do you want to start getting into our cards of truth now?
Yep, definitely.
Wonderful. You're right ahead of me.